Hello and welcome to the 2026 Volunteer Income Tax Training Series. My name is Chris Moon. I am an associate teaching professor in the Ivy College of Business at Iowa State University. I have mentioned in the previous couple of training videos, and I'm sure I will mention again in the future, the intake interview form. I'm usually probably referring to it as the intake form or the 13614C. So I wanted to do a quick training video just to kind of go over the intake interview form and make sure that we go over some of the really important parts of this. So if you notice at the very top, it is the client filling out their name, address, date of birth, and mailing address, phone number, and email address. For our site, it is really important that we do have either a telephone number or email address for the client. Actually, it's probably important for all sites to have that, because every once in a while we will get returns that are rejected. They're sent back, and we need to contact the client to either get additional information or get some questions answered for something that was on the return. All right, so underneath that, it is important to know if someone else can claim the taxpayer or their spouse on their tax return. And we have a lot of student taxpayers at Iowa State University, so we pay really close attention to this one. But actually, everyone should be making sure that they are looking at this question. If the box is marked yes, it is very important to ask the taxpayer if the person is claiming them. So as you are entering the information in TaxSlayer, the first question is, can someone claim you on their tax return? If you answer yes, then another question will pop up that says, is someone claiming you on their tax return? And you need to answer yes or no to that question as well. We sometimes have students who will tell me that they don't know or they're unsure, and we make them contact the parent to find out yes or no whether the parent is claiming them, because it will result, if the parent claims them and they mark no, it'll result in someone's return getting rejected, and it just takes a lot of extra time for someone to get their return filed. So make sure you're looking into that. Next is to know if the person is a U.S. citizen or if they are here on a visa, if they're a full-time student, and those questions are really important in determining filing status. If the person is here as a student on a visa, they file as a non-resident or a resident depending on how many years they've been in the United States. So we can have someone who is here on a visa who is not a resident of the United States but has actually been here long enough to file taxes as a resident. So try not to confuse those two things. Make sure that if the person is here on a visa, that you're taking the time to go through and answer the questions on whether or not they should file taxes as a resident or non-resident. All right. Also, if the person is legally blind, disabled, or if they have an identity protection PIN, it's important to know that, because I think I mentioned this in one of my previous videos. If they have one and you don't list it, their return will get rejected. All right, how do they want their refund, direct deposit, or split? I don't think this year, it says check by mail is one of the options. In my training that I've had, I'm pretty sure that check by mail is not going to be an option this year. There could be exceptions to that, but I don't think so. Also, getting down to the bottom of this page, filing, marital status. This is going to help you determine the filing status, and we talked about this in the last video, but it's really important that if the client is divorced or legally separated or widowed, that you know what year that happened, and if they're married, you need to know if they are living with their spouse, and if they are not living with their spouse, since when. All right, and then down at the bottom, this says, list the names of everyone who lived with you during the last year except your spouse and anyone that you supported but did not live with you. Now, we have a lot of students who have roommates, and they will say, do we need to list our roommates on here? No. If you're a student and you have, 3 roommates because you have an apartment with 4 bedrooms, those people don't need to be listed. But generally, if you have, relatives or children living with you, make sure the client is listing those people on this intake form. All right, a couple of years ago, they changed the intake form to have this gray section. And I know the forms, when they deliver them to you, they're actually yellow, but it's still shaded. The left part is for the client to fill out. And it's really important in this income section that the client fills out every single kind of income that they received. And it is up to us to figure out if those are taxable and if they go on the tax return and where. So that is what the shaded section is for. So it is important that when we get the client sitting down with us, that we go through this income section, we verify everything. And for example, if the client marks that they have alimony, well, alimony may or may not be included in income depending on when it was ordered. If the alimony was ordered starting in 2016, it's income to the client. If the alimony was ordered in 2020, it is not taxable income to the client. So important for us to go through when we do the income section. We'll talk in more detail about that, but that's why this shaded section is important to know whether or not we include this information on the return, and if so, if it's taxable or not. So going through each one of those items as the client is sitting with us. Expenses, same thing. On the left-hand side, the client fills out any of those expenses that they had, and then it's up to us to figure out whether or not those expenses are going to be listed on the return. So if the client does have, we have actually a fair amount of clients that come in that have mortgage interest, they have real estate taxes, they have medical expenses, charitable contributions, etc. But we don't list those on the return because when the client shows them to us, let's say the client is married filing jointly, and I take a look at their itemized deductions and I see that the itemized deductions are $5,000. Well, that's nowhere near the standard deduction for married filing jointly, so I am not going to take the time to enter those onto the return. If I do this part of the intake form before I start the return, I'm going to save a lot of time entering information. So just make sure you're asking questions and filling in the shaded portion before you start the return to save you time as you're doing the return. All right, this section of the intake form has optional information. We request, if the client wants to fill this out, these are questions that are asked at the end of the tax return process. And most of our clients at our sites fill these out, and we go ahead and enter the information. Sometimes you can add questions to the end of TaxSlayer. We have some other questions that we add to the end of TaxSlayer that our clients do not have to answer, but if they're willing to do so, we include that just as we're gathering information about what types of clients we serve. Any additional notes or comments that the client has or that you have, put on this section so that as you're going back through and you're actually filling out the return, you can go back to these notes and make sure you get everything on the return that you need to. And then this consent to disclose tax information to other sites. It's important to have the taxpayer sign this if they consent to these terms. What this allows is it allows the information to stay in TaxSlayer so that any VITA site across the country can access their information. So we have a lot of students, again, as I've said a lot of times, and if we have a student who's leaving Iowa State University, they're going to go take a job in New York. Well, that first year, if they still qualify for VITA and they have consented to this, they go to that VITA site and their basic information stays in the system. So that's all this does. Our site doesn't disclose any of this information to anyone else, and so it's just important to know the policies of your site and to make sure that the client signs this if they consent to having their information saved in the system for future years. All right, so this is the intake form that I will be referring to in future videos and that I've referred to in the past. And so thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you in the next training video.